What's wrong?
Hey man,
How are you?
good. How are you?
Good.
So today is a special day, if you can call it that.
Yeah, I think it is. 26th anniversary of Rich Mullins' death. So, died in 1997. We were, our youth group had gone on a trip to Atlanta to see a Braves game. And we got back Sunday night, and the radio station I was listening to, they played a Rich Mullins song, and the DJ was like, "That's a song by the late, great Rich Mullins." I was like, wait a minute, what did he say, late? And then the story came out. He had died on Friday, but I'd been gone all weekend, so I didn't hear it until Sunday. And 20, the Countdown magazine, which was a big popular Christian radio countdown show, did a tribute to him the following week. Mostly old interview excerpts, things like that. But I was vaguely familiar with him at that point. I had Songs, which was a hits compilation he had published the year before, but knew nothing about his personal life. All that was stuff I discovered after he died. He was very unique. He was not your typical Christian artist.
Yeah. It's what was so healing about him, I think.
Yeah.
Just a great need for that sort of courageous authenticity, I think. And
Yeah, so much of the Christian music of that era, and really probably of every era, tends to. And it's not wrong to have this kind of music, but so much of it tends to be music that is very grandiose in its expression of love for God. Like, I love you so much, I'll never leave you. Like, and then those are biblical ways of expressing. Like the Psalms use language like that, but Rich Mullins tended to focus more on God's love for us than on our love for God, which I always found to be a helpful way to focus things, because our love is really not that impressive.
well, speaking of, you had a quote that you really liked that you wanted to talk about real quick.
Yeah, so early in Rich Mullins' career, every tour he did would have like a different theme, and he would talk about that theme throughout the concerts. But apparently, like towards the end of his life, the last few years, instead of picking a different theme for each particular concert, the theme just always was God's love. He just decided to make that his permanent theme. I think some of that was due to the influence of Brandon Manning. That was kind of Brandon Manning's theme in his books. Which that can sound kind of overly simplistic, like to only talk about that one thing, but it's really not. You can never say enough about it. This particular quote, I think he was just kind of talking off the cuff at a concert with him. This wasn't like a pre-planned, golden nugget of wisdom, but he said, "And I think of all the things we think we want to know, the only thing we really want to know is that we're loved." I hope you know that. Because if the life of Jesus Christ means anything, it means that you're loved. And I hope that you stop worrying about all the things you don't know, because I don't think it amounts to a hill of beans. So if you just kind of break that down and think about it, it's true, because most of the bad behavior that we see in the world is a really misguided attempt to find love. And if people really believed that God loved them, that would solve most of our problems,
Yeah. Not in a sentimental, shallow way, but I have the courage and honesty to face one's true self, and still believe that God can love you. As Brennan Manning used to say, that takes a degree of foolishness.
Brennan Manning said in one of his talks that on Judgment Day, there'd be one question people were asked by God: Did you believe that I loved you? And he hypothesized there would be some people, even like clergy, who had spent their whole life talking about God's love, but they really didn't believe that God loved them. It was just kind of hypothetical for them. And I thought it was kind of overly simplistic when I first heard him say that, but the more you think about it, I really think it is, because the language the Bible uses is to walk by faith, or to live by faith. And what that really means is believing God's promise. And the most basic promise that you have to believe is that He loves you So to believe God loves you is the same thing as walking by faith. And it's the hardest thing in the world to believe, because anytime you face some kind of trial, or anytime you fall into some kind of sin, the first thing that you're going to question is whether God really loves you. So to continue believing that day in and day out throughout a lifetime is the hardest thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was at the core of the first sin, Adam and Eve. If they had really trusted above all else that God loved them, they wouldn't have questioned what he said. They would have been like, well, he loves me. Why would he tell me something that's not true, that's not good for me?
Yeah.
And
and so many of the errors in the church today, like legalism. If you analyze it, what's behind legalism, or the idea that our acceptance with God is based on our performance. It's the idea that it's the idea that God couldn't really love us in our worst moments, and that we can't bring to God our true worst, because if we did, he would reject us. And it's kind of the idea behind licentiousness too, because licentiousness, the idea is that God doesn't love us enough to really care about our day-to-day lives. He's kind of a hands-off parent who just wants us to have a good time. That's not the most loving parent. The most loving parent really does care about how you're living your life. So the correction to both of those is to believe that God loves you with a love that is loves the real you.
I saw a quote. God loves the real you, not the you you're pretending to be.
Yeah. Dietrich Bonhoeffer had a similar quote. God loves God doesn't love an ideal you, but the real you.
That's great. Anyway, I'm grateful for Rich Mullins for lots of reasons, but he just was a conduit of God's realistic love for me. A sign that God can love me even if I wasn't put together.
It's funny, this whole conversation, we haven't mentioned any of his song lyrics.
Right.
If you really want to know what Rich said about this subject, you look up his lyrics, because they're beautiful. One of the best on this topic was from one of the last songs he wrote. We're not as strong as we think we are. It says, when we love, we walk in the water, just don't stumble in the waves. We all want to go there, something awful, but to stand there and take some grace. It's a beautiful line.
Yeah.
Probably what captured my attention about Rich Mullins, on a personal level, the most was the biography, Arrow Pointing to Heaven, which explained that he's lived a very countercultural lifestyle. He gave away most of what he earned, and he spent the last 2 or 3 years of his life on a Navajo reservation. At the height of his success as a recording artist, he left the industry and went back to school to get a music degree, because he didn't have a degree, and he needed a degree to teach music on the reservation. And he genuinely didn't care about the spotlight, which is really unusual for somebody in his position. He didn't care about the fame, he didn't care about the money. And when he died, he had very little, because he had given away almost everything he'd earned, which just really blew my mind when I learned that.
And all I can say to that is may the love of God do the same in us, in our contexts.
Yeah.